9:14 p.m., May 3, 1941. The velvet, lit main room of the Apollo Crown Lounge on West 126th, Harlem, where the air smells like cigar leaf, sweet gin, and hot brass. Duke Ellington sat at the piano under a spotlight that made his tuxedo look like midnight. The band was tight. The room was full. And then a laugh, sharp, rich, mean, cut through the music like a bottle breaking. A man in the front row, diamond ring flashing every time he lifted his glass, stood up mid-phrase and shouted, "Play something the people paid for." The note Duke held didn't crack. His face didn't change. But you could feel it. The humiliation landing in the room like ash. Freeze that. Because the cruel heckler wasn't drunk in a sloppy way. He was drunk in a confident way. The kind of drunk that comes from money and friends who make consequences disappear. And the question isn't, will Ellington swallow it? The question is, what happens when a man tries to buy humiliation as entertainment, and Harlem decides respect is not for sale? But that wasn't the end, because a whisper would move backstage like a match traveling across a fuse. He's here. And when the backstage door opened, it didn't open to a manager. It opened to Bumpy Johnson. No, listen. This is a fictionalized, dramatized street legend, telling with cultural caution. Not a claim of strict historical accuracy. No instructions. No glamorizing harm. Just the truth of a city's psychology. Power can be loud, but the scariest power is quiet. Duke's power came from art. Bumpy's power came from access to people, to favors, to the boring paper that decides who gets protected and who gets handled. The city doesn't run on rules, it runs on favors. And tonight, a favor was being used as a weapon against a man who didn't deserve it. The heckler's name was Vernon Pike. Old money habits, new money arrogance. His tell was the way he wiped imaginary lint from his lapel every time someone didn't obey him. Like disrespect was dirt. Vernon wasn't just heckling, he was testing the room, testing Ellington, testing Harlem, because he had a plan behind the insult. The institutional face villain was Inspector Harold Mott. City entertainment licensing, clipboard king, smile empty. His tell was tapping a small brass ruler on his clipboard twice whenever he spoke. "Tap, tap, by the book," Mott would say, like the book was holy. The shadow villain was club owner Warren Kline. Clean suit, cleaner hands, eyes that counted everything. His tell was adjusting his cufflinks before he delivered bad news, and his favorite line came out warm as soup and cold as debt. Let's be practical. The on-scene enforcer was Dutch Ramires, house muscle, toothpick in the corner of his mouth, soft shoes, heavy shoulders. His tell was whispering the same phrase right before a room obeyed. "You heard me." Those three made the trap. Vernon would provoke, Kline would manage, Mott would document. Dutch would enforce, and Duke Ellington, an artist, would be used as the night's lesson in who really owned the room. Backstage. Duke had his own small circle. Not soldiers, not criminals. Alleys. People who mattered. Ruthie Caldwell, journalist with an ink-stained index finger and a nose for exploitation. Calvin Bryce, a union rep and contract hawk with thin frames and a habit of adjusting his glasses when he smelled a lie. Miss Odessa, the older broker, numbers queen. Yes, but also the auntie of the block, eyes sharp, never blinking first. And little Leon Vega, a runner with restless knees and a heart too big for his own safety. They were there for different reasons, but they all understood the same thing. Humiliation is never just emotion. It's a transaction, and somebody always tries to collect. Vernon Pike lifted his drink again. "You call this music?" he barked, loud enough for the band to hear. "You call this a show?" A few nervous laughs came from men who didn't want to lose proximity to Vernon's money. Duke's hands hovered above the keys, calm, composed, professional. The band waited. The room held its breath, like it knew what was about to be demanded. Vernon pointed, ring flashing. "Play the hit," he ordered, "or I walk." That was the mistake, because men like Vernon don't just walk, they take the room with them. Warren Kline appeared at the edge of the stage, cufflinks adjusted, face apologetic. "Mr. Ellington," Kline murmured through a tight smile, "let's be practical." Duke looked at him. "Quiet," Kline continued. "Low. He's a patron. He's generous." Duke's voice was measured. "I'm working," Duke said. Kline nodded, still smiling. "Exactly. So, keep it smooth." Inspector Mott stood near the bar with his clipboard. Ruler tapping. Tap, tap. "By the book," Mott said to nobody in particular. Eyes already imagining reports. Dutch Ramires drifted through the aisle, toothpick in place, whispering to a waiter who paused too long. "You heard me," Dutch murmured. And the waiter moved like he'd been pushed. Duke's eyes flicked out at the crowd. He saw the nervous laughter. He saw the men hiding behind their glasses. He saw Vernon Pike owning the moment. And he did what professionals do. He swallowed the first bite of insult. He played, not because he agreed, because he refused to let a heckler control the sound. But the room didn't forget. Harlem doesn't forget disrespect. Harlem stores it minute 6. Backstage smelled like sweat, cologne, and old wood. A trumpet case leaned against a chair. A towel hung over a radiator pipe. Duke stepped off stage between numbers. Face calm, but the silence around him was louder than applause. Calvin Bryce adjusted his glasses. "That man's not just rude," Calvin said quietly. "He's signaling." Ruthie's eyes were sharp. "He's buying humiliation publicly." Miss Odessa sat in a folding chair like it was a throne. "Baby," she murmured, "money makes a man loud, but it don't make him right." Leon paced, knee bouncing. "Why don't we just throw him out?" Leon blurted. Dutch's voice floated in from the hallway like a warning. "You heard me." Dutch murmured to someone, and footsteps shifted. Calvin exhaled. "You can't just throw out a patron when the owner is in his pocket." Ruthie leaned in. "So what's the play?" Duke didn't answer immediately. He looked at his hands like they were the only honest thing in the building. Then he spoke quiet. "I don't fight in rooms," Duke said. "I play." Miss Odessa nodded, but her eyes stayed hard. "And while you play," she said softly, "they try to make you small." Ruthie's voice lowered. "This is bigger than a heckler, Duke." Calvin nodded. "It's paperwork. Paper can kill you in this town." And that's when the whisper arrived, fast, electric, passing from a stagehand to a bartender to a trumpet player like a secret with shoes. "He's here." Leon stopped pacing. Ruthie's eyes widened. Calvin's fingers froze on his glasses. Miss Odessa didn't blink. "Who?" Duke asked. Though he already felt the shift in the building's air, Miss Odessa's voice was calm. "Bumpy," she said. "Hoer won." Bumpy Johnson didn't enter like a storm. He entered like a door closing. No announcement. No crowd parting dramatically. Just a subtle change. Men straightening their backs, smiles tightening, voices lowering. Harlem power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears a quiet suit and a patient face. Bumpy stepped into the backstage hallway where the light flickered and the floorboards creaked. He glanced once at Dutch Ramires. Dutch's toothpick stopped moving. "You heard me," Dutch began automatically, then caught himself. Bumpy didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He just looked at Dutch like Dutch was a receipt. Dutch swallowed. Bumpy's eyes moved past him to Warren Kline, who appeared quickly, cufflinks already adjusted. "Mr. Johnson," Kline said with a strained smile, "let's be practical." Bumpy nodded slightly. "I love practical," Bumpy said. Kline's smile tightened. "This is a private event." Bumpy's voice stayed soft. "So is a humiliation," Bumpy said, but everybody saw it. Kline glanced around, nervous. We can smooth this over, Kline murmured. Bumpy tilted his head, calm. Smoothing is what you do when you're hiding scratches, Bumpy said. I'm here for the dent. Kline's jaw flexed. Dutch leaned closer, toothpick returning like a shield. You heard me, Dutch whispered. You can't just... Bumpy's eyes flicked to Dutch. Dutch's words died in his mouth. That was the first freeze. Control without shouting, Bumpy turned to Ruthie, who stood nearby watching everything like she was collecting evidence. Ruthie, Bumpy said. You got your pen? Ruthie nodded, voice steady. Always. Bumpy nodded once. Good, he said. Because if they want the night to be paperwork, we'll give them paperwork. Day one, the ticking clock wasn't a week. It wasn't days. It was the show. 2 sets. Lone intermission, lone encore, and one night before the story hardened into reputation. Bumpy made the promise early, calm as a man stating the weather. 45 minutes, Bumpy said softly backstage. Calvin blinked. 45 minutes for what? Bumpy's eyes stayed steady. For the room to remember, Bumpy said. Who respect belongs to. Ruthie swallowed. That's a clock. Bumpy nodded. 45, he repeated. And nobody touches anybody. Leon exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Miss Odessa murmured. Baby, the cleanest lesson is the one that don't need bruises. Calvin Bryce, the union rep, had been staring at the club contract all week. He leaned in. Kline's got a clause, Calvin whispered. Morals clause, conduct clause. It can be used. Bumpy nodded. Then we need it. Ruthie frowned. How do we get Kline's contract copy? Calvin adjusted his glasses. Back office? Locked drawer. Kline's too proud to carry it. Bumpy's voice stayed calm. Then we borrow it, he said. Complication would come with the borrowing. It always did. Minute 3. Leon slipped down a service corridor that smelled like mop water and frying onions from the kitchen. Calvin followed, shoulders tight. Ruthie stayed at the corner, eyes on the hallway entrance. Miss Odessa remained near the backstage door, like a watchful auntie. Bumpy didn't go with them. That was the point. He wasn't the thief. He was the certainty. Leon's knee bounced as he whispered. I don't like offices. Calvin's voice was low. Offices are where decisions hide. They reached Kline's office door locked. Leon looked at Calvin, panicked. Now what? Calvin pointed at the key ring, hanging on a hook behind a glass panel. Careless confidence, Leon's fingers trembled. That's the mistake, Calvin whispered. Men with power get lazy. Leon slid a thin wire from his pocket. Nothing fancy. Nothing instructional here. Just a quick fumble that reminded you he was more courage than skill. The glass panel popped open with a soft click. Leon grabbed the keys. They entered. The office smelled like cologne and paper. A desk lamp cast a tight pool of light. Calvin moved to the drawer he'd seen Kline lock before. He turned the key. Inside, the club contract packet, and tucked behind it, an internal memo stamped in purple ink, Quiet Fund. House use only. That stamp was the memory hook. Quiet Fund, house use only. A phrase that sounded innocent and felt dirty. Calvin's eyes widened. This is it, he whispered. Leon reached for the packet. Complication 1 hit. Footsteps outside. Slow, soft shoes. Dutch Ramires, toothpick tapping lightly against his teeth. You heard me, Dutch murmured from the hallway, voice too calm. Leon froze. Calvin's hands tightened around the contract. Ruthie's whisper drifted from the corner. Urgent. He's coming. Calvin slid the packet into his coat. They moved toward the back window. Complication 2. Hit. The office door swung open fast. Dutch stepped in, toothpick angled, smile thin. Behind him stood Inspector Mott with his clipboard. Ruler tapping. Tap, tap. By the book, Mott said, eyes bright, like he'd been waiting for this. Dutch's eyes locked onto Calvin's coat. "You heard me," Dutch whispered. "Give it back." Leon's face went pale. He looked at Dutch. Then, fracture moment, his eyes flicked to the hallway like he was imagining running with paper, running alone, running into consequences. Dutch leaned in gently, voice warm like poison. "Kid," Dutch said, "hand it over and go home. Nobody needs your name tonight." Leon's mouth opened. "I could." Leon started. Calvin's voice cut in, sharp, quiet. "Leon," Calvin said, "don't trade your spine for an exit." Miss Odessa's proverb landed through the wall like it was spoken in his ear. A fast deal makes a slow regret. Leon swallowed hard. "No," Leon said, voice shaking. Number Dutch's smile vanished. Inspector Mott tapped his ruler harder. "Tap, tap. By the book," Mott repeated, stepping forward. "Unauthorized entry. Theft. We can." Calvin's voice stayed steady. "We can what?" Calvin asked. "Call police." In an entertainment licensing office with a quiet fund memo. Mott's ruler paused mid-tap. Ruthie stepped into view, notepad in hand, ink-stained finger visible like a badge. "Say it again," Ruthie said calmly. "I want it clean for print." Dutch's toothpick stopped. He didn't like witnesses. Bumpy's voice floated from the hallway, calm and close. "Everybody all right?" Bumpy asked. Dutch turned his head slightly. Bumpy stood at the end of the corridor, not rushing. Just present. The air changed. Dutch didn't move toward him. Inspector Mott's ruler went still. Kline's office felt suddenly smaller. Bumpy didn't shout. He just said 2 words, soft, "Walk out." Calvin walked out. Leon walked out. Ruthie walked out. Inspector Mott stared, torn between by the book and the fact that the book doesn't protect you from reputation. Dutch watched them leave. Toothpick dead. Jaw tight. That was the second freeze. Har 2. Backstage. Calvin laid the contract clause and internal memo on a table under a buzzing light. Quiet fund. House use only stamped in purple. Ruthie's eyes narrowed. "This is a slush line," she whispered. "Money set aside to manage incidents." Calvin adjusted his glasses. "It's also a conduct clause," he said. "It gives the house the right to remove disruptive patrons." Miss Odessa smiled without warmth. "Baby," she murmured. "So the law is there, it just ain't been used." Duke Ellington looked at the paper like it was louder than any horn. "You brought me paperwork?" Duke said quietly. Bumpy nodded. "Paper can kill you in this town," Bumpy said. "But tonight it's going to save your dignity." Duke's jaw tightened. "And if it doesn't?" Bumpy's voice stayed calm. "Then the room learns," Bumpy said. "Who it's cheering for." Har 2. Time remaining, 15 minutes. The second set began. Vernon Pike sat even louder than before, smiling, wiping lint from his lapel tail. Ring flashing. Warren Kline hovered near him, cufflinks adjusted, whispering like a servant in a nice suit. Inspector Mott positioned himself where he could see everything. Tap. Tap. Dutch drifted in the aisle, toothpick back, eyes scanning. "You heard me," Dutch murmured to a waiter, as if rehearsing control. Duke returned to the piano. He started the set clean. The band followed. The room leaned in. Then Vernon Pike clapped off, beat on purpose, laughing. "Pretty," Vernon called out, voice cruel. "Real pretty. Now play something we can use." A few nervous laughs. Kline's face tightened. Mott's ruler tapped faster. Tap, tap. Duke's hands kept moving. His face stayed calm, but his eyes flicked once. Backstage, a tiny request without words. And that's when the backstage door opened. Not dramatically. Just open. and Bumpy Johnson stepped into the edge of the stage light like he belonged to the silence. Freeze that, because the reaction was physical. A woman near the bar gasped and spilled her drink, amber spreading over a white tablecloth like a warning. A waiter stopped mid-step, tray trembling. Inspector Mott's ruler slipped from his hand and clacked against the floor. Dutch's toothpick fell and rolled, and Warren Kline, Mr. Practical, Miss, hit his own composure, adjusting his cufflinks twice like he forgot how hands work. No big speech. Bumpy didn't need one. He walked to the front row, stopped beside Vernon Pike's table, and looked down at him. Just a look. The kind that rewrites the night. Vernon Pike tried to smile through it, wiping imaginary lint. "Can I help you?" Vernon asked, voice forced. Bumpy's voice was low, polite. "Yes," Bumpy said, "you can stop." Vernon laughed weakly. "Stop what?" Bumpy nodded, once toward the contract clause Calvin had quietly handed Kline moments earlier. Kline stood behind Vernon, pale, holding the paper like it was hot. Bumpy's voice stayed calm. "Your house," Bumpy said to Kline, "has a clause." Kline swallowed, eyes darting, cufflinks trembling. "Let's be practical." Kline whispered automatically. Bumpy tilted his head. "Be," Bumpy said. Ruthie's voice carried from the side, sharp and clean. "Conduct clause," she said. "House reserves right to remove disruptive patrons, signed." Mott's face tightened. "By the book," Mott started. Bumpy looked at him once. Mott stopped. Because this wasn't a street moment anymore. This was paperwork in public. And paperwork in public makes institutions behave. Bumpy turned back to Vernon Pike. Vernon's confidence was melting in real time. He tried to stand. Dutch shifted in the aisle. Toothpick gone, as if to help. Bumpy's eyes flicked to Dutch. Dutch froze. Control over muscle. Bumpy didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten violence. He just spoke the one line that made Vernon understand the room had changed owners. "Tonight," Bumpy said softly, "you're not the customer. You're the disturbance." Silence hit the room like a curtain dropping. Then Kline cleared his throat, voice shaking. "Mr. Pike," Kline said, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Vernon stared at him, shocked. "You can't." Vernon hissed, "You know who I..." Kline swallowed, eyes flicking to the purple. Stamped memo. Ruthie held up just enough to be seen. Quiet fund. House use only. Ruthie's pen didn't move, but her presence did. Vernon's mouth opened, then closed. Because he understood. This wasn't about a fight. It was about a record. And records outlive men. Vernon's voice dropped. "This is a setup." Miss Odessa's voice floated from the back, soft and final. "Baby," she said, "if you buy disrespect, don't cry when it comes with a receipt." Vernon's face flushed. He looked around for allies. The men who laughed with him earlier were suddenly fascinated by their drinks. That's how favor networks work. They stay close until consequences show up. Then they develop manners. Vernon stood slowly, wiping lint from his lapel one last time like a prayer. He leaned toward Bumpy, trying to salvage pride. "You think you won?" Vernon whispered. Bumpy's voice went slower. "Meaner?" "I didn't come to win," Bumpy said. "I came to remind." Vernon swallowed. Then he walked out. Not dragged, not harmed. Just removed, and that's when the room understood the real headline. Respect. Duke Ellington kept playing. He didn't pause for applause. He didn't acknowledge the drama. He simply let the music reclaim the air like it belonged there all along. Consequences came in believable chains. First consequence. Kline's practical world shifted, with Ruthie watching and the quiet fund memo floating in whispers. Kline's backroom flexibility got expensive. Inspectors stopped doing favors for free. Promoters started negotiating in writing. Kline didn't become good. He became cautious. Second consequence, Inspector Mott lost his easy weapon. Because once a licensing inspector is seen protecting a heckler while, by the book, pretends not to see slush memos, his book starts getting questioned. A review meeting gets scheduled. A superior asks for clarification. The kind of bureaucracy that feels like a leash. Third consequence, Vernon Pike's access narrowed. Not magically, not overnight, but in Harlem, doors remember, tables get reserved. Invitations get misplaced. The worst punishment for a money man isn't jail, it's irrelevance. And the team paid a cost because saving dignity isn't free. 2 nights later, Savoy Deli got a random inspection. Miss Odessa received a tax notice stamped urgent. Calvin Bryce's union office got audited. Ruthie found a fresh scratch near her apartment lock. Nothing stolen, just a message. Leon got followed home by a car that stayed just far enough back to be polite. That's the system's revenge. Not bullets pressure, but pressure is survivable when you're not alone. After the show, Backstage smelled like sweat and brass and relief. Duke sat on a folding chair, towel around his neck. He looked at Bumpy, eyes calm but tired. "I didn't ask for that," Duke said quietly. Bumpy nodded once. "I know," Duke's voice was measured. "You made it a thing." Bumpy's eyes stayed steady. "They made it a thing," Bumpy said. "I just chose the ending." Ruthie leaned in, conflicted. "Was it justice?" she asked. "Or was it intimidation dressed clean?" Bumpy didn't dodge. "Both," he said softly. "That's the honest answer." Calvin adjusted his glasses. "Sometimes the only way to protect art," Calvin murmured, "is to enforce the contract." Miss Odessa smiled faintly. "Baby," she said, "a man can rent a room, but he can't rent a legend." Leon finally exhaled. "So, Harlem protected him?" Leon asked, nodding at Duke. Bumpy looked at Duke, then at the door, then at the hallway beyond where the night waited. "Harlem protected itself," Bumpy said, "by refusing to laugh at disrespect." Duke's eyes softened a fraction. He stood, straightened his jacket, and gave Bumpy a small nod, artist to street. King, dignity to certainty. Bumpy didn't smile big. He didn't need to. He just spoke the moral line, clean and quotable, the kind that sticks. In a city that sells everything, respect is the one thing you can't buy, only earn, or lose in public. Then, quieter, and if you let a bully write the room's rules, don't act surprised when the music turns into noise. So if you felt that backstage whisper, "He's here," if you saw the drink spill, the ruler drop, the toothpick roll, and a whole room remember manners in real time, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, was Bumpy defending Duke Ellington, or defending Harlem's pride with a cleaner kind of threat? And don't go anywhere, because the next story is colder. Next time, a charity gala gets hijacked by a politician's handler, and the only thing that saves a community center is one phone log stamped "House Eyes Only" that makes the entire boardroom go silent.